Welcome, Aries, to your Jupiter into Leo 13-month forecast for the ascendant, the sun, or the moon. The mighty Jupiter roars into the fire sign of Leo for the first time since 2015 on June the 30th. We can talk about Jupiter in Leo from a general viewpoint, but what will it mean from a purely Aries perspective? On the screen is the exact moment that Jupiter arrives, and all the other planetary influences are going to help to provide a backdrop for the next 13 months through to the 26th of July 2027. I'm going to unpack that for you, Aries. I'm also going to share with you when Jupiter moves through the second decan of Leo, which it governs. I'm also going to share with you about Jupiter's retrograde and some other key dates. By the end of the video, you'll have a clear picture of what's upcoming in terms of your energy, work, relationships, or finances. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now to help it to continue to thrive. But please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Now, just to say, when Jupiter moved into Cancer in June 2025, it was trumpeted by many because it was in its exaltation as being a huge opportunity. But when Jupiter arrived, it was afflicted badly by the greater malefic of Saturn, Jupiter, the greater benefic. But as Jupiter moves into Leo, we get a much more positive and dynamic skyscape, but it's not perfect. And I think one of the things that's very important, it's a real responsibility as an astrologer to tell you about the gritty bits as well as the bits that could provide some real delights. So I'm going to be very truthful with you. And so on the screen is your event chart, and there's Jupiter for you in house 5. So that's a double Leonian vibration because the fifth house very much based on Leo. But Jupiter rules the second decan of the sign of Leo, and Mars, your ruler, rules the third. And also Mars, your ruler, is in a delicious sextile to Jupiter. So when we're talking about energy and the potential for hope, buoyancy, growth, dynamism, what we're being encouraged with here is the oxygen of Gemini, an air sign, towards the fire of Jupiter in the fire sign of Leo. We also, if we think about it, Jupiter rules the sign of Sagittarius, which is a fire sign too, as well as its rulership of the sign of Pisces, which is much more to do with faith and spirituality. We also have in your zodiac sign Neptune, the co-regent of the sign of Pisces, in a delicious trine with Jupiter. So if ever there was a time to reimagine our outlook and our approach to life in a much more passionate way, fire, and really take inspiration from Neptune and Jupiter together, it really is now. But we also have Uranus very, very close to Mars. And what Mars brings, I think, is a more muscular energy. Because in the sign of Gemini, yes, Mars pushes us to express our ideas, but it can also make us more physically active. And because Jupiter in Leo is very much about confidence, it can give us the self-belief to think that we're really going to do something really well. It can also, because Leo is a very kind sign, can also bring out our generosity because Jupiter does have a connection to that as well. So whether that is supporting people, mentoring people, good causes, charities that really call out to us, but perhaps particularly to do with performance, the arts, or maybe children's charities, because very Leonian too. And any leadership talents we have, particularly with Mars, your ruler, in such a dynamic link to Jupiter, they're really encouraging each other on to take fast, speedy, decisive action. And of course, with the electric energies of Uranus also in the mix, linking to Jupiter, there's a sense of renewal, excitement, of positivity in what has been generally for the world at large a really challenging time in recent years. We've had war, we've had cost increases, we've had obviously COVID, we have had a lot of concern about the pace of change around technology, automation, robotics. And all of that has been feeding into our overall consciousness. And because Neptune is the planet of inspiration in the fiery sign of Aries, linking itself brilliantly to Mars and to Uranus, all of this is really going to give us a chance to recharge our sense of hope. But for you, Aries, I think it's particularly brilliant. Now, if you are someone who teaches, if you are someone with brilliant ideas, if you are someone who wants to express yourself in a more visible and confident way, it's a fabulous window of opportunity for you. So I feel that Jupiter in Cancer was massively oversold, but I think Jupiter in Leo has a much greater prospect to work out in a much more positive way. So there's going to be setbacks along the way because that's life, isn't it? If we just think it's always going to be a polar between huge disappointment and huge breakthroughs, then we're going to repeatedly be let down. But it is important that we're not overconfident. I think that is worth saying. And also, it's important to just watch a tendency for dogmatism, because Jupiter can be about our world view. And particularly as Jupiter's in an opposition with Pluto, the likelihood is there are and is ongoing a battle for ideas. And of course, because Mars is in Gemini, we're going to see a lot of aggressive messaging, particularly on social media or any kind of media that we encounter. It's also important not to be over generous. It's great to be kind. It's better to be kind than to be mean. Let's be honest about it. But we also need to look after our own needs first. And I think it's also important to stay grounded, to stay earthy. And on that note, I'll introduce the fact that this event occurs just as the Capricornian full moon has reached its peak, and there is the moon high in the sky. So for you, the most dominant planet, or luminary if you like, and the moon in Capricorn is not at its best in terms of that emotional encouragement, but it's definitely very good for being sensible and realistic about resources. But its opposition to the sun in the watery Cancer is also something we need to be conscious of because of Mercury having just started its formal retrograde on the 29th, just as that full moon occurred. So we don't have perfection. We also have Mars, and to a slightly lesser extent, Uranus in a T-square with the nodes. So that North Node is certainly saying it's important to stay in touch with our instincts, to not be so caught up with the desire to manifest that big picture, that exciting project, or to really find that lover that really meets our expectation. In order to really be successful with that, stay in touch with the intuition. So that's been the lessons of Saturn in Pisces, and of course Neptune over many years in Pisces, and more recently the North Node. One other footnote as well is that we do have a square between Jupiter and Chiron. So that's where that potential to perhaps be a little bit too generous could show up, or perhaps to show off in a way which covers up a wound around our sense of self-worth, which may be lacking. But more constructively, Saturn is in a very solid link to Venus. So if you're lucky enough to be in a long-term relationship, the chances are that can get more sealed in. I really do believe that. So I'm going to tell you about that period when Jupiter is in the second decan of the sign of Leo. So it goes from the 15th of August, a lot of information to remember. So please accept my apologies for looking at my notes. I did look at one other very well-known astrologer the other day, and they were looking at their notes all the time, and I usually don't look at any. So from the 15th of August to the 9th of October, Jupiter is in its richest phase because then it's in the second decan that it rules. But that's repeated because the retrograde begins on the 13th of December and goes through to the 13th of April next year, from the 27th of February through to the 28th of May. And those periods really will give you even more chance to animate the talents, the belief, the strengths, you know, that furnace that drives all passionate fire signs forwards, that's being oxygenated in such a fabulous way for you. Now, in terms of two particularly critical dates, I think really the fact that Jupiter is in that link with Uranus and Mars is really encouraging, because an event chart is just like a birth chart. You know, this is the birth of Jupiter moving into Leo this time. And therefore, the enthusiasm and passion that comes from Mars and its nimble energies in Gemini applying in that wonderful sextile to Jupiter, they're really egging each other on in the most fabulous of ways. But on July the 29th, we do have one of astrology's most lovely influences. Yes, the Sun in Leo will apply to Jupiter. So we have a Jupiter Cazimi. So watch out for that, because that also happens on a full moon, which an Aquarius full moon as well, which is intriguing. So that's going to bring an extra richness too to the months ahead. Now, I feel also, because we have the solar eclipse in Leo on the 12th of August, and by then Mercury will be out of its tangle through the sign of Cancer and be in Leo. The second half of this year, although someone did write to me and said, but what about the South Node in Leo? Well, for sure, the South Node perhaps tells us to try to escape pride. You know, if we're covering up our frailties by acting out in some way about how, you know, amazingly larger than life we are, where we need to really use Jupiter's energy in a very helpful way is to be authentic. And particularly because Uranus is in the mix, because that's what Uranus is very much about. So if you're thinking, but also engaging with ideas and express them in a way with enthusiasm and passion, but they're really part of you, you're not going to come across as acting out at all. So a really encouraging event compared to the last Jupiter transit through the sign of Cancer. Now, just to say, I've produced the Jupiter factoid, which you can download absolutely free. It will tell you all about the mythology, the astrology, the astronomy as well. And please take advantage of that. And also, I'm going to summarize those 4 areas of energy, work, relationships, and finances next. But if you've yet to, I'm trying to think what the most recent video was. You could check out the solstice video, because that provides a 3-month forecast for cardinal quadrant 2, because Western tropical astrology is based on the seasons, not based on the calendar. And it is a Mediterranean construct, so it was in Western tropical astrology the summer solstice. Totally know it's the northern in the southern hemisphere, sorry, that it's the winter solstice. But that is a video that I think really helps you to understand the quadrants in astrology, I hope. And there's a factoid on that as well. Now, I've reduced the price of my personal horoscope reports. For many years, if you tuned into my channel, if you brought 2, it's 30% off. Because of the cost of living increases, I'm trying to make them as accessible as possible for as many people as possible. So it's now 3 for the price of 1. The one you pay for is your life roadmap report, which helps us to understand the patterns that are going on in our lives, get a more intimate understanding of those, and how to work with them better future forwards. Free, your 12 months transit forecast, but also your draconic soul karmic analysis. Please see below for more. Now, if you've yet to sign up for your free daily written horoscope via your device, please see the link below and get your early day celestial pit stop. And if you'd like to work with me one-to-one, it'd be an absolute pleasure. I work with people the world over. So to summarize, as far as energy is concerned, I have to say, I think there's a lot to like about this energy-wise. But one of the things you mustn't do is omit to consider that more emotional, psychological, and spiritual dimension that the North Node, before that Saturn and Neptune, have been asking you to grapple with in recent times. Because of that energy of your ruler Mars in a T-square with these guys, if you're getting so caught up in the excitement that you don't take account of the need to rest, retreat, recharge, whether it's physically or emotionally, that could create some burnout at times. But I think overwhelmingly, there is a hugely dynamic and positive vibe around this event. As far as your finances are concerned, interesting that Chiron's there, isn't it, in that second house and in that square to Jupiter. So I think it's really quite clear. The fifth house can be about speculation, and Jupiter can, of course, be the planet of risk in terms of making money. So I wouldn't be too quick to bet what you can't afford to lose, which seems very standard advice. But you do have that lovely link between Venus and Saturn. So the things that you're doing, Venus being the planet of money, that are solid, well thought through, why not keep on keeping on with them? They could work out spectacularly well for you. Professionally, with the moon at the top of your chart and the sun at the bottom of your chart, I think for a fire sign, being really engaged in something is very important. But a bit like that North Node, you're being nudged there. Stay in touch with how it feels, and that will guide you just as much professionally as it will in any other part of your situation. But I think if you are a creative, that link between Pluto, Mars, and Uranus really is very exciting if you are collaborating with people where you can express your ideas freely. When it comes to romance, well, Jupiter and Venus in the two planets of fortune in the fifth house of love, very, very hopeful. But as I said before, very important to be realistic as well. And with Mars and Uranus in that conjunction, you could go into several situations over the next 13 months, which, start off very exciting, but just work with it, because with Jupiter in that opposition with Pluto, you need to be sure that who you're linking to, however flamboyant it may be, however gorgeous they may be, however irresistible they may, there could be a bit of obsession that creeps into the mix, quite understandably. But I think it's going to be lively, put it like that. And it could be that through expanding your interest in terms of friendships and activities, it's going to be a brilliant way to bring a spark into your life if you're single. If you're in a long-term relationship, this can be, I think, a really very, very exciting year ahead for sure. But if you're struggling in a relationship, Jupiter in that fifth house, I really feel that if your sort of beliefs just do not mesh, you don't have similar values, I think that square between Jupiter and Chiron does speak up quite a bit. It's been a pleasure being with you, Aries. I'm wishing you all the very best. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.